So today we're talking about unmute yourself, facing your fears, and stepping into the spotlight. What does that mean? That's a mouthful.
Yeah. You know, we're one of the things that I was afraid of is, wow, first of all, what am I going to say? And then once I say it, what are people going to think of me and my thoughts? Yeah. Welcome back to Conversations at the Well. I am your host, Vern. I forgot my name, guys.
How about that? Would be kind of cool. I'll be Desiree for a day. Hello, y'all. How are you?
I don't sound like that. But I am your host, Desiree Brown, and I'm joined with my amazing husband,
Vernon Brown.
Yes.
Now, I want you guys to pay attention with like version after version and episode after episode. See how long that amazing husband lasts. Hopefully, we can keep that going.
We're 10 years in, so it's lasted this long. So that's up to you to keep it going.
Anyways. So today we're talking about unmute yourself, facing your fears, and stepping into the spotlight. What does that mean? That's a mouthful.
Yeah. Yeah, well, in our last episode, we kind of touched on it where there was this idea for this podcast. And actually, originally, it was your idea, like probably a few years ago.
Really?
Yeah. Oh. You said we should do a podcast.
That's true. I'll take credit for every good idea.
And I was pretty much a deer in headlights. Like, I don't even think I really mentioned it because I was like, I don't want to do that.
Okay.
But interestingly enough, we were sitting here in the well one day. We were actually in the middle of a business class. So I was like, we need to do a podcast. It just came and I was like, wow, he's mentioned this before, but we're probably going to have to do this now because I already know he wants to. And now I'm on the same page years later. So
may not come when you want them, but
so here we are.
Okay.
But I had a lot of fears.
Yeah.
Still have some fears.
You still got fears right now?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
But, you know, what I have learned on this journey of
is that your husband is always right?
Interestingly enough, you are right a lot.
Okay.
I won't say every time, but you're right a lot. And so when I listen, things tend to work out well for me. I'm still learning that lesson. God help me. But, you know, we're one of the things that I was afraid of is, wow, first of all, what am I going to say? Mm-hmm. And then once I say it, what are people going to think of me and my thoughts? Yeah. Yeah. Like kind of uncovering me. I have been told that like people I've known for years, they're like, I didn't get to really know you until this conversation 7 years into the relationship that we have. And I'm like, am I that guarded? So apparently I have this guard and I'm not very aware of it, but apparently it's there.
Well, I don't even think it's uniquely you. And what I mean by that is like, I think all of us have a true and authentic version of ourselves that doesn't see as much light of the day as whatever other version we think people want. Yeah. And I don't think it's necessarily to be fake or to be phony, but there is a self-preservation kind of thing going on.
Absolutely.
Whereas my truest and most authentic and uncovered and naked self, that's something that I hold very close to me. Because I would think that, you know, of the two of us, you're much more open and communicative of who you are, I guess, truly than I am. Like, I'm a very guarded person. I'll tell you that anything you ask, I'll answer. But we live in a society where most people don't ask questions. And so because of that, people say that I'm not that open, but to hear you say that people are like, I don't even feel like I know you. It's kind of crazy to think that because you have all the friends and people connected to, whereas me, it's like, I'm just okay in my little box here trying to make life happen.
Yeah, it's a interesting thing, kind of very strange actually when I really think about that. But so this podcast is my opportunity to not only uncover myself to people who we know and love who will listen to this, but also to people who we haven't yet met and to share our thoughts and perspectives on life and the world and open ourselves up to the thoughts and opinions of other people and their critiques and their criticisms of our thoughts and opinions. And it's a bit scary. But it's also a bit freeing.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to this. You probably noticed we have on the same clothes, and I was like, babe, that was so fun. Let's keep going. I hope that was okay to say.
Well, this is an example of like feeling self-conscious about your thoughts and opinions, because like I could care less. Like maybe I wear the same thing every day. They don't know. They're not here. Who knows?
Transparency, since we're talking about being like open and real.
Okay.
This is the same day. It was a few minutes after we recorded the first one.
Whatever makes you feel okay, baby.
I wanted to keep going because it feels good. It's really awesome. I love talking to you.
I'm glad.
You're my favorite person.
I'm glad.
And so I was like, okay, let's go for it. Let's go ahead and the can is already open. Let's get it. What more is there to do? What other preparation is there? Because all we have to do is be open and share our thoughts.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So you started out kind of scared and worried or upset in some ways. How did you get from there to wherever you are now, assuming that's a different place, at least some level different?
One thing is that you said stop putting so much pressure on yourself. Like it's just it's just a conversation.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I can do that. I like conversations. We have conversations. Like that's a kind of simple, right? Yeah. But I guess the other part of it was kind of listening to other podcasts too, and just seeing that it doesn't have to be, I don't know. I was thinking it had to be so structured. It had to be this way, that way, blah, 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 blah. And I mean, maybe we'll get into that as things go along. But I kind of took the pressure off myself to not feel like I'm not the trendiest person. Okay. So like, I don't watch a lot of like popular TV. I don't listen to a lot of popular current music. Like I'm really a 2000s girl. That's kind of my genre, and I kind of like it, and I stick with it. Occasionally something here and there. And so I kind of had a fear that like would that be okay? Like if I'm not talking about the hot topics of the day because I don't really know it or don't keep up with those things, would that be okay? Would that be something that people want to hear or whatever? I don't know. So that was another thing. And so when I kind of took the pressure off and said, this is really a conversation. It doesn't have to be all that. I need to be just who I am. I do have a perspective that is interesting that I think maybe somebody is going to want to hear. I mean, those of you who are listening now, I appreciate you because that's kind of validating that. And then there were just other things, just listening to different books about like, just do it. Yeah. Like just start. And I think this is really a testament to the just start, because not only did we do episode 1, we're now working on episode 2. And it was just because we decided to push play.
Absolutely. And I think that's a huge thing. I mean, there are always reasons to not do it. There's always more studying, more preparation, more thought, more money that can be spent.
Yeah.
But what you can't supplement with buying things or preparing or studying is just doing it.
Yeah.
And so, when you get to the point where you can recognize and appreciate that there's a spot in the world carved out in your shape, in the shape of your voice that only fits your voice. There are people who have the same 2000s era desires, who have the same experiences as you, that are waiting for your voice. You find out that it's not so much about you not fitting the culture, but the culture is in fact waiting for you to share what you have with them.
Yeah. Now I have a question actually for you.
This question thing was only supposed to go one direction.
Yeah, I know. That's typically how you like it. That's your like you are the question asker, and so you don't often get pulled to the carpet and be able to share yourself as well. But I'm curious for you. Has this, were there fears for you going into this? Like what, if anything, were you afraid of, or what were your hesitations to get started with the podcast?
I'll tell you from a podcast perspective, to me, it's just talking.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just asking questions, and granted, there is a camera, there are microphones, there is a desire that whatever audience we find or finds us, they enjoy it. But I don't really focus too much on that.
Yeah.
I focus more on controlling what I can control. So am I prepared? Do I know what we're talking about? Do I know like roughly what it's supposed to see, what it's supposed to, what the experience is supposed to be like? And that's kind of what at least from the perspective of the podcast, how I focus my attention. It's like, it's just talking. And above all, it's talking with my wife. Like, who doesn't love that?
Yeah.
And so I don't have too many nerves or nervousness. At least at this point, probably when we dive into some more difficult topics, I may get a little bit of that anxiety like you have. But for right now, it's just talking, and I like you. So I like talking to you.
I like you too, baby.
I'm glad. You should.
Yeah. So, which is so interesting because sometimes, I often ask you, like, what are your fears? And so, we're different.
Yeah.
We're built different. But it seems like you find comfort in the operations of it and the like development and like, do we have the right mics? Do we have the right lighting? Do we have all the other tech stuff that I personally could care less about? Like,
and
I'm like,
probably care less about, to be honest with
like
you.
I'm like, oh, we need like a phone, right? And maybe some mics. So, we'll be good. But you're more of that. I think, I don't know if it's like almost like you put your energy, maybe I don't even know if it's nervous energy, but could be some of the nervous energy into like the preparation.
Yeah, I think I get a lot of comfort in being prepared. And so that means different things for different genres, whether it's work, whether it's home, whether it's family.
Yeah.
But for this, like the preparation, we didn't really have a outline for what we wanted to say until like 30 minutes ago, truth be told. But so all the preparation to get that, I guess you can call it nervous energy out, was done in, okay, how do I make it look good, and where do I post it, and what tools do we need, and how do we record it, and all of those things. And that the confidence that comes through preparation, in this instance, I got it from preparing from a technical perspective more so than a speech or a conversation perspective.
Yeah. But in this particular instance, like we have the awesome setup. Thank you, babe.
Yeah.
You did great. But we're going to be talking about our thoughts and our feelings, our emotions, our perspective, our view of the world.
Yeah.
Does that unnerve you at all?
No. I would say no, because rightfully or wrongfully so.
Oh, Lord.
This is where it takes a turn. Rightfully or wrongfully so. Like, I think a lot about not just my perspective, but my perspective in the eyes and the experiences of others. And what I mean by that is we're subject, our perspectives are as a result of where we've been and how we've grown up.
Yeah.
Which is great because it gave us the tools we need to succeed in that environment. But it doesn't mean that it's the best way of thought or the best way of dealing with issues or problems. And so for me personally, I spend a lot of time thinking about my thoughts and when they make sense and when they don't make sense, and trying to adopt a better way if my way doesn't make sense. So with that, when you're communicating your thoughts and your opinions, there are going to be different opinions. People are going to think different things, but it's not that often where someone thinks of something that I haven't thought of. And so I get a lot of comfort in knowing that, I thought of that. And for me, that perspective doesn't work. So not that I don't care, but from my perspective, I don't really care because I've thought about it. That doesn't work for my life. And so if you disagree and I don't agree with how you're disagreeing because of this, and this, then I'm very comfortable where I am. Now, in those instances where someone provides me something that's like, oh, wait, I never thought about that, or I never saw myself in that light, or I never thought you would feel that way, then that gives me pause. And out of that, hopefully comes a change or a different perspective. But I try to kind of force test or fail test every thought process I have in trying to figure out what's the best way to do things and the best way to communicate things.
It sounds like you think a lot. Actually, I know you think a lot.
Yeah, I'm always thinking.
You are. That brain is always moving. Meanwhile, I'm over here like, do.
One of us got to always be we can't both be walking on sunshine all the time.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess I have the perspective of kind of experiencing life as it's coming, for better, for worse. I mean, maybe that's a good thing. Sometimes it's got its consequences too. But I kind of appreciate that. And I think maybe you appreciate that sometimes when in the times you're not appreciating that.
Yeah. Okay.
Just because we balance each other out, and like when I'm saying something, it's not like strategically like
it's not manipulative, right? Like you're not trying
yeah.
to make things happen in one particular way.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great principle in that we're different, very different.
Yeah.
But there's still appreciation for the differences. Like I may not want to adopt a particular trait that you have. You may not want to adopt a particular trait that I have. But at least we can get to the point where I can understand and appreciate where your perspective is different and how it serves you.
Yeah.
And I think in our society or community, like it's so often where just because it's different, it's bad.
Yeah.
It's like it's not bad. It's just a different tool for a different problem.
Yeah.
I may have a wrench over here. I may have a screwdriver over here. One of them's not better than the other. It's just made for a different tool or made for it to solve a different problem.
Yeah.
And when we can start appreciating the differences in our opinions and how we've been raised is when we can start pulling the best of everyone and hopefully making something beautiful out of it.
Yeah. So I have another question.
Oh, Lord. I thought I was going to get out of here with one. If I talk enough, she'll forget.
No, well, so we wear a lot of hats.
Okay.
And you can talk about more of your hats, and I can talk a little bit more about my hats. But do you think that the response? Well, I know the answer to this, but do you think that the responses that you give or the perspective that you give changes or shifts based on the hat that you're wearing at that particular time? And I guess just to kind of expand on that, in what ways, if that's the case, in what ways?
That's a good point. I think that's a good question, I should say. I think fundamentally the response is the same, but the care in which the answer is delivered is different.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So what I mean by that is if somebody just random is asking me a question, I may just answer it off the cuff and hope that you understand the nuance of it. And if not, who cares? I'm probably never going to see you again. Let's be honest. Whereas if there's a person who I'm deeply invested into, it may be, okay, here's the idea. Here's how I got here. Here's where it doesn't work. And here's where it does work. Mm-hmm. Now, if it's talking about, something biblical and what I'm teaching on like a Sunday morning or something, well, then there's a whole lot more responsibility in making sure that you speak the truth. Mm-hmm. But then also protect against it being misinterpreted. So I think fundamentally everything that you say and everything that you think is true and is foundational and doesn't move, but the care in which you communicate those things are different. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I mean, I guess it's with anything, like any good communication one-on-one, the very first thing is to know your audience, right? And so that makes a lot of sense. Just acknowledging and recognizing that there are different people that you connect with, they have different purposes in your life, and the way that you communicate with them would be different. So like, even like with our kids, like there's just some ways that we would communicate with them sometimes in a manner that's more like trying to break down larger concepts into smaller, more understandable bits just because they're young. Yeah. Sometimes in a manner of authority because like I'm your parent, I need you to listen.
Yeah. On the first time I ask.
But, you wouldn't approach me in the same way or, a coworker or a boss or, people who at the church or anything like that. So, yeah, I was curious what you would say on that. I kind of knew, but I just wanted you to expand on it.
Yeah, no, I think no matter what you do for a living, communication and getting better at communicating should certainly be something that we all aspire to.
Yeah.
Because so many arguments and misunderstandings and, misjudgments of people happen because of a failure of communication.
Yeah.
And if we can be better communicators and we can be better galvanizers around our ideas, we can do a lot more with less because everyone's pulling in the same direction. We just be a whole lot more productive than if we, expect people to know what we're thinking all the time when you don't know what I'm thinking and I don't know what you're thinking and we're just trying to figure out how to do this thing called life together. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense.
Absolutely. What else you got? I want to roll.
Those are all of my questions right now. Not to say more won't come up.
Yeah.
Because again, we didn't pre-plan this one in the same way as the other. But do you have any questions or things that you wanted to bring up?
No, I think the big thing that kind of underlies this whole conversation is we spend so much of our life muted with our ideas. I mean, if you want to get down to the nitty gritty of it, like when you're growing up in your parents' house, no matter how free flowing your parents' ideologies were, probably you were silent more than you were talking. And when you go into college, it's less about what you think and more about echoing what your instructor or your professor thinks. You go into the workforce. Once again, it's more about, in a lot of cases, it's more about, you doing the work as it's been done more so than coming up with your own ideas. And as we step into 2024, it's all about creating your own stuff and figuring out how you can be creative in your own right. And I think if there's one principle that we want everyone to leave with, it's the fact that what you say matters and what you think matters and the ideas you have matter. And you may think that everyone else thinks the same way. You may think that someone else has already thought of those things, but no one can be as uniquely you as you. And that's a very important thing and something that's very valuable to society. So if you're sitting on some word or some idea or some business or some plan or some new way of doing things, don't just think that it's not valuable. It certainly is.
Yeah. I mean, I as you were talking, one thing that came to my mind was really about where your ideas come from, like because there's so many ideas in the world. And they're conflicting. They compete. There's so many different ideologies. There's so many different viewpoints. And so, I mean, I guess for me, my anchor and my foundation is built on my faith. And so just being a Christian, the Bible as the foundational, like that's the word of God. That's my belief, is that it is the immutable. We talked about being mute, the immutable and infallible word of God. Yeah. And so even when there are things that, I guess, when things deviate from that, that's my source. That's where I go back to. That's where I think a lot of my ideas and my ideologies come from. But even within the Christian faith, there's still a lot of varying viewpoints because of an interpretation of the word. And so I always think that that's interesting. But I mean, I think our audience, they're going to recognize that as we continue to go through and talk, that for me, that's my anchor. That's where I'm going to go back to. And even when my I have a mind to say, wait a minute, like I would rather do things a different way, but because I believe so deeply, I'm still always going to go back to that. So it's just, I'm curious what you would say is your anchor. And I think I would be really interested to know, as we get to talk to other people and maybe the folks that are online and watching now, or maybe they're not watching, maybe they're listening on their podcast channel, or what it's called. But I'm curious.
That thingamabob, right?
Yeah, I'm curious to know, like, what is the foundation for your thoughts? Where do you go back to, especially when something is challenging you? You can answer this if you like, but I definitely want to hear from others about like what that thing is for them. And then I guess that's the main thing.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a lot foundationally on logic.
Okay.
But where I think it's a little bit different than common knowledge is a lot of people would say, well, if it's logical, then it's not biblical or not faith-filled. And I don't think that's necessarily the case, because to me, faith makes logical sense. And so to make that work, there are some beliefs and ideas that I have that it's like, no, it's going to be logical today. This is the way it's going to be. Just to make it, because I mean, let's be honest, when it comes to faith, everything's not cut and dry.
That's true.
Because it's not faith if it's logical, right? And so, or if it's not faith if you have proof and evidence.
Yeah.
And so to make that fit within your logical box, there are going to be some things where it's like, this is a duck because it got to be a duck. that's just settled and that's what's going to be.
It's a duck, yeah.
But for me, that's why I spend so much time like thinking through life and thinking through decisions and perspectives, because it has to make sense. And for me, I'm a very, and whether I don't know whether you like it or not, but I'm a very habitual and repetitive person, because everything is built on logic. And if I believed it yesterday, chances are I'll believe it today until somebody proves otherwise.
Yeah.
And so to me, that makes life a lot more simplistic, where everything's kind of black and white. And if you choose to appreciate the gray, in which sometimes you do, you're making a decision to recognize and appreciate the gray, which is still a black and white decision. So I think for me, it's certainly undergirded in faith, but it's kind of overlaid with logic to make it make sense and make it functional for my life.
That's definitely true for you.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, as if you didn't know that, but yes, I know that to be very true. Whereas mine is more overlaid with feeling.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not to say there's no logic there, but it's definitely there are emotions there. But I don't tend to be like highly, I guess, strongly emotional. Like I don't get like intensely angry or intensely, whatever. So I tend to be a bit balanced in that area, but there is but I feel that this is the right way to go. Or I don't know what it is. It's just like a feeling. Like that's kind of where I come from a lot when it comes to our like choices and decisions. Yeah.
So what I want to talk about, I think next week is, we obviously have this huge topic of religion, and it's something that is super active and governing in your life and probably a lot of our listeners' lives. But there's also another perspective where it's like someone who may not be a believer.
Yeah.
They're like, what about real life? And so I think it would be interesting to talk about the differences, the similarities, and how you can live a religious-led life in a tangible and physical world, and what that looks like on a daily basis. Because
Absolutely.
You can't live in this cloud your entire life when there's real things going on, real problems, real situations, real wars. Like I think it'll be really cool to talk about like what that looks like and how we relegate through that and where we find peace in the midst of everything that's happening in this world.
Yeah, that's a really good topic, and I'm looking forward to that conversation. I mean, really, this is about when life and faith collide. I
love that title.
That's the foundation
it's
of
this. It's a whole lot better than everything I just spewed in the microphone. When life and faith collide.
Yeah, that's the foundation of this podcast, and so it makes sense for us to go there and like really dig in and talk about it, because there's some real problems going on in the world, and how do we rectify that from various viewpoints. I mean, with the viewpoint of faith, but also just like the reality of like the pain and the just sometimes overwhelming experience of even if it's not happening directly to you, but knowing that it's happening to other people in the world is a lot to take in. So how are we doing that?
And I think it's a very pertinent topic too, because you moved your entire family based upon faith.
Yeah.
Like that's real life that's being taken a hold of by faith. What did that look like? What did that confirmation look like? How did that process look?
Yeah.
And for our watchers and listeners, what can we peel from that to help us live a more fulfilling and fruitful life based upon whatever faith we choose, or whether we choose against faith? What does that look like? And how can that kind of help us figure out a better way of living? I think that'll be really cool.
That's going to be great.
Oh, Lord. I'm afraid of what you're going to say. But thank you so much for joining us this week for Conversations at the Well. I hope you got something out of it, and above it, beyond all else, I hope you take the mute button off of your life and do whatever it is that you've been hiding in your heart, holding in the back of your mind, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a business, whether it's anything you're aspiring to. You can do it. The world needs what you have. The first step you need to take is taking action and going out there and doing it.
Absolutely. Thank you again for joining, and we will see you next week.
See you then.